Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the fantastic Nicole Patrie. We're talking about being a first generation scholar. We talk about crooked paths to PhD projects. We talk about invisible support systems. And Nicole shares a mantra that should be on the front of everybody's t-shirt. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Nicole.
Hello.
Thank you so much for getting up early and getting yourself into the office today to talk to us. I really, really do appreciate that. And it is a subject today that is really dear to my heart. And we're talking about first generation scholars, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you about that. And we were just talking before about how a really important part of this podcast can be helping people to feel less alone. And I think it can be a really scary journey as a first generation scholar going into a PhD. And the plan is now today is to love everybody up so they feel supported on this journey. So that's no pressure, but that's where we're getting to. We're going to start with finding out more about you. So if you could just tell us about your story.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today. So I guess my story is a little bit crooked. And so I grew up in a small town in the prairies in Canada, and I was good at math and science. And so I went to university to become an engineer because that's what I was told to do. I am clearly not an engineer anymore. I switched in my second year of university. I was in this class that everyone looks forward to, and it was supposed to be the highlight of your second year, and it was terrible, and I hated it. And so someone told me, you should be a teacher. You're really good at explaining things. And so in a week, I switched into education and did my undergrad training to become a high school math teacher. And so I did that for a year. And then I moved back to a larger city and didn't find a teaching job. I ended up finding a teaching job inside of a prison, and I loved it. And so that is sort of the beginning, I guess, of like the way finds you, right?
Yes. Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, so I taught in prison for a few years, and decided I needed to do some more graduate school, to do some more. We're not trained to teach in prisons,
Right.
And nor is there a master's degree program anyways that does that yet. So I did a master's degree while I was working in adult education, and then I moved into program admin, so sort of like a principalship of the prison school. And then I got to the point where I wanted to think more deeply about the issues and contribute to society more broadly instead of just my little prison school circle. And so that's how I ended up being in a PhD. And I wish I could say I thought deeply about all of these transitions, but I really, really didn't. I just sort of looked at what could happen and what happened quickly, and then I just kind of jumped in every single time. Without much forethought.
Oh my goodness. Right. So first of all, I love that I didn't know this about you, that you've done a lot of prison work. I've done quite a bit of prison work as well. And what a setting to be working in. And oh God, right. So we need to, after this podcast ends, right, I'm quizzing you.
Sure.
So that's just for us, everyone. Right. So but what I also love about what you said was that yours is a crooked story. And what I love is so many people come onto this podcast and go, right, well, it's not straightforward. And I think this is the first point of sharing, right, isn't it? That people's PhD journeys are very rarely straightforward and straight down the line. And I love it. And because the crookedness of your story is the beauty of it. And I also love the way finds you. That totally is. You see, during the podcast, I write these things, you see, I'm writing these things down to kind of like, what's the quote from this? The way finds you. It's already, we're done. Job is done. We've already got the quote for today. The way finds you. But this sense of following the breadcrumbs, I guess, really, isn't it? And now getting to a point where you're like, actually, and what a beautiful thing you said in terms of wanting to do this study in order to serve your community and serve the wider community. So this is This is gorgeous, right? I'm already in love. Um, so this is what's brought you to the PhD. But what I also know from what you said is that you're first generation scholar. So and that's what we're here to kind of unpack. So you didn't set out at the age of 5 and go, do you know what, I'm going to do a PhD. Definitely not in education, obviously. So talk to me about that. Talk to me about coming towards the PhD program, and the challenges and surprises of that.
Yeah, so I'm a first generation scholar in the broadest sense of the word. So my parents do not have university or college degrees. No one else in my family. My brother went to university for a bachelor degree the year before me. So we have very, very little experience in that. And so I think that's part of why I say my journey is crooked, because we don't really know what we're getting into.
Right. Yes.
I signed up for a master's degree program in the university that was in the city I lived in because it was there, and I didn't know what it was about. And I wish I could say I knew what the PhD was about when I signed up and applied, but I really, really didn't. I knew that I would be doing a dissertation, which was like a big research project, but I didn't know how long it would take, what it entailed. I had no idea what candidacy was about, or comprehensive exams, all of this stuff that most people know. I just knew that I was going to do this thing, right?
And sometimes that could be brilliant, actually, not knowing what you're letting yourself in for. Can be a
brilliant and terrifying. I mean, we don't know how scared and how worried we should be, right? And because of that, because I didn't know what I was getting into, I sort of treated it like a job, because I was moving from my job as like a program manager of the prison school into a PhD program, and I had a little child, and so I was working from 8 to 4 because that's the time I had, and I was very, very clear that like I quit my job to do this thing, and I wasn't getting money for it because I didn't know about funding.
Oh, bless you.
Until later. I know about funding now.
Oh,
Right?
good. That's good news.
I didn't have a funded PhD in the way that I've come to learn that people have them.
Right.
And so I was putting together sessional jobs and TA-ships and stuff like that. But I really didn't want it to impact my family, because my partner has a bachelor degree. He works in industry, but no one else in our family does. And so I didn't want this. I've heard that PhDs and graduate studies are all encompassing, and that's all like eat, sleep, PhD, right? And you can't do that when you have kids. And now I have 2 kids, and you really can't do that. So I treated it like a job, and I just kind of did what I tried to do during the day, and then went home and tried to forget about it. Right. Which worked really well until the pandemic happened. And then because I was the one without a job, I was the one who was doing the childcare, right? And so it's the decision we had to make, but it meant that I was a full-time PhD student who wasn't actually doing any PhD work, right? And that's okay. And I think when I think about first-gen scholars, and even, broadly, just people in graduate programs, we don't really know what to expect, and we don't really know what's normal. Right?
Yes.
And I remember standing in an elevator in probably my first year. So I started my PhD in 2019. So I had 5 months before everything shut down of regular graduate studies. I remember standing in an elevator with some education undergrad students, and they were talking about an assignment that they had. And one of them said, "Oh, I'll just get my mom to help me. She's a lawyer." And just the way that they talked about it, just so off the cuff. And it never dawned on me before that people had parents who went to university. And I know this should make sense, right? Because like I have people in my life who are professors who are clearly older than I am, who went to university. So it makes sense that but I never understood that people can ask family members.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I know exactly what you mean. As you know, that's my story, in terms of I was the first one in my whole family to go on, and exactly that thing of that someone could ring up their mum and ask them how to do footnotes. That's another world, right?
Yeah, and I wish I could say I realized this before I was 36, but I didn't. It took me until then to realize that.
Well, your own normal is normal. They're always normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that was the moment where I started realizing that things that I was experiencing it differently than other people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then started to be more intentional about getting and finding and asking for support, and being a little bit more open about that, because in my positionality, I'm a white middle class woman who just kind of fits into academia, right? Like I
Right.
fit in very nicely. I can walk the talk, I can game the system, I can learn the things I need to learn. Um, but I do also have this side struggle, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I don't think it's a giant side struggle, but it's there, and I needed to notice it in order to do
Yeah.
something about it, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's that thing, isn't it, of like you said, what I love you said about getting intention about asking for support, because there will be lots of people with invisible support systems, well, invisible to you support systems. And you might be thinking, why is this so hard? Why does everybody else just seem to know what they're doing? Oh, they must be amazing. And I'm stupid. That's what people kind of come to the conclusion, because they don't know that on the other end of the telephone line for that person is a whole set of information, and all those contacts and all that information. So I think this is brilliant in terms of you saying, okay, yeah, actually they've got support systems. I need to gather in my support system too.
Mhm.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I mean, an example, thinking back to how I didn't know that funding was a thing, I was applying for scholarships and didn't know I wasn't getting them, right?
No.
But I asked somebody if I could see a copy of their scholarship application who was successful. And of course they sent it to me because people share things, but I didn't
Yes,
know
they
that people
do.
shared things,
They
right?
do.
And so I started being like very specific about emailing people. Can I see a copy of your research proposal? Can I see a copy of your scholarship application? Can you have a look at this for me, right? How did you format
Brilliant.
it? Um, because if we don't create that support for ourselves, the only person we have is our supervisors, right?
Yeah.
And they're lovely and they're great, but they can't do everything and they're not meant to do everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I
So we
think,
need to find it ourselves, you know?
well, I think the other thing is that if you, first gen scholars tend to be incredibly resourceful, and they tend to have done a lot of things by themselves and done a lot of that research by themselves, got themselves to a place. And then it's okay to ask other people to help you. It's not cheating. And as you say, people will be very happy to help. And so to know that that is a possibility, you don't have to do it all by yourself, and make it super hard. You can get that support in place.
I'm just looking at my notes and I wrote down one other thing, like finding the supports, but also not needing to hit the ground running. And so we have this idea, or I've seen other people when they enter PhD programs, that they need to start publishing, they need to start researching, they need to start working on their proposal right away. And we have coursework that we do, right? I had to
Yes.
do 8 classes before I wrote my research proposal. And so we don't need to start, like, yeah, you need an idea to get into the program, right? But you don't need to be that overachiever that we all are at the beginning. We can sit back and we can watch other people and we can ask and we can go to their workshops, and we don't have to give our own yet, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we can learn in that way too,
Yes.
because we don't know what it's like. We've never been in this environment before, and so we can sort of, I don't like the term be an anthropologist, but we can be an anthropologist in academia and watch.
Yes, so it's a bit different in the US and the Canadian system, than it is in the UK, because you do because there you do sort of start, but how brilliant that you do get, like you say, a bit of a soft start into just observing. And I recommend people, when they are thinking about the PhD, and they can do this, in the UK system where you need to sort of get going, that you might have a look around, perhaps go to some of the people's presentations, those kinds of things, so you get a sense of, like you say, to be an anthropologist, get a sense of what kind of language are people using, where, who's in the room, what's going on, so that you can sort of acclimatize yourself a little bit, so it isn't just kind of like jumping in at the deep end. And I
Mhm.
think it's important, because understanding that it is a big step up, it's complete stepping into a completely different arena than your master's program, than you're definitely from your undergrad, but even from your master's program. And so kind of knowing that that is going to be a big shift, and readying yourself for that, I think makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
And I mean, you don't like, I come from education, so we don't go into a school and start teaching on the first day. You go into the school a week before and you set up your classroom and you organize things. And same with prison education. We don't hire new teachers and then send them into a classroom on their first day. We let them look around, we let them observe, right? And so why should it be any different,
Yeah.
right? And so we can watch and we can try things. And I like how you brought up going to workshops and seminars and stuff before you even apply, because I'm realizing that I did that. I mean, I applied and then I decided to see what this was actually about. And I did go to a few like roundtables on campus, and just sort of sat in the back and listened. And like, it was intimidating because people sound so much smarter because there's ways to ask questions
Yeah. Yeah.
or a professional setting, and
Yeah.
there's all of these ways to do things and find out what that new culture is, right?
Exactly. And I love that you kind of framed that up as being an anthropologist, because it is just, because it can be very intimidating. And as I say, especially if you're first generation and you're kind of like, I don't even know what they are doing here. But from that anthropological point of view, you can be really curious and go, oh, this is interesting. There's different codes going on. There's different types of behavior. And I can learn the codes. I'm a good learner. I can learn the codes. And so I think that having that perspective is a really gorgeous way of looking at it. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I'm aware of time. This time just speeds by. So there was a lot of good stuff there around the experiences and also ideas that you have employed for yourself. You know, getting intentional about support, being the anthropologist, treating it like a job, all those kinds of things. Anything else that you had that you wanted to say?
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of getting supports is that we know now that you ask for things and you get them, and it's easy to get samples of scholarship applications and CVs and stuff. But I think there's that other element of that we have to complete the circle and we have to continue to give that back to other people.
Right.
And so we have to we get support and mentorship from other people, and we need to give it back to others. And not always do people know that they can ask for these things. And so once you get to that point where you feel sort of comfortable in the environment and you have some networks and you have some answers and you've won some awards, to even offer like to the new student, would you like me to send it to you? Right? Let's talk about it. I can send these documents to you. It's not a secret, right? And that we can continue to support others in the way that we've been supported. And I think that's the whole point of it. Right?
Oh, Nicole, you are so gorgeous. And this is, and your generosity in being here shows that too. Absolutely yes, absolutely yes. And I think that paying it forward is awesome. And this is the way that we change academia too, isn't it? In terms of that kind of generosity of spirit, that we're not sort of hiding our work, and that we can be truly collaborative, and that is a beautiful place to be.
And like, yes, it's a competition, right? Like we can't hide the fact that we are competing for money and jobs and whatever, but if someone's already won it, they're not going to win it again, right? So you can pass that information along.
Right.
You can celebrate other people's successes, and you can be happy for your colleagues and your fellow students. And like you said, we're only usually the only person in an institution studying something. I'm the only person studying prison education. So I can be happy for my friends studying queer education or teacher education when they win things or get things, because I'm not in the running for those anyway. And even if I was, I would be happy anyways, right? So that uniqueness makes collaboration and success more sweet, I think.
Oh, yes. I'm going to do it now. I'm going to ask you for a top tip. So I do to everyone. It's very cruel, I know. But out of all of that, do you have a top tip for us?
I do. I don't think it's a tip so much as a statement. And so I'm halfway through my PhD, and I ended up getting an assistant professorship position just by luck. And my supervisor looked at me and said, "You do belong here. Like you are here and you can make a valid contribution and you belong here. And so I think that is my thing, is that sometimes we don't feel like we do, but we can. And the fact that we are maybe quote unquote untraditional means that we have something new. And that's how we can change it.
Oh, right. That's going on a t-shirt. There's the merch right there. You belong here. There's the merch. But also, I do just have to say, it wasn't by luck, Nicole. You're brilliant. That's why you've got your assistant professorship. So, thank you so much for this. Yes, we will have your details if people want to make contact, because I'm sure they will want to make contact with you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, and thank you for being just such a gorgeous, generous spirited soul. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for listening.